we work with our trailer manufacturer customers to integrate steering systems into these trailers so that they can maneuver the rocket up to where they need to place it.
Good morning and welcome to episode 57 of The Crownsmen Show featuring KG Industries. Today, Jared is joined by their president, Luke Jenberg, and in this episode, they dig into KGI's primary products, their self-steer axles, force-steer axles, off-highway axles, and standard trailer axles. But before we get started, this episode is brought to you by two great customers of KG Industries. First up, Nelson Manufacturing. Nelson Manufacturing offers crane attachments including boom dolly and boom launch trailers. Visit them at nelsontrailers.com to check out their capabilities from hydraulic removable gooseneck to specialty trailers and telescopic to ramp trailers. Find out more at nelsontrailers.com. Next up, we have Peerless. Peerless designs and manufactures highly specialized trailers for a variety of industries, including oil and gas, forestry, construction, superhauling, and mining. Peerless offers market-leading models and consistently launching best-in-class designs. Learn more about Peerless at peerless.ca. Next up, we also have Savona Equipment. Savona Equipment supplies new and used mining equipment around the world, from placer to underground to ore processing plants. They have gold concentrating tables, trommels, and mineral jigs in stock now to take advantage of the high gold prices. Go to savonaequipment.com where you will find more equipment every day. Last but not least, we have Power Zone Equipment. When you need a specialized team of world-class engineers for your oil and gas, pipelines, dewatering, or any fluid handling needs, you want to visit powerzone.com. In addition to their inventory of rebuilt pumps, motors, engines, they also have an amazing team to design and engineer your systems, no matter the challenge, no matter the location. Get in the zone with PowerZone. Visit them at powerzone.com. Well, let's get on with episode 57. Here is Jared Downey and Luke Jenberg.
Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Jared Downey, and this is episode 57 of The Crownsmen Show. Today, I have the president of KG Industries, Luke Jenberg. How are you, Luke?
Good. How are you doing?
Good. I know that KG Industries goes to lots of trade shows and that sort of thing, and I know, or has in the past, everything's been shut down with everything that's gone on. But have you ever had a chance to do one of these long form shows before?
No, this is the first one for me.
Yeah, we hear a lot of that on the show, so I'm glad you joined. It can be a little unnerving. All of a sudden, there's cameras and all that sort of thing. So thanks for coming on. I'm looking forward to kind of going through everything with you. Usually I get people to just give a snapshot of what they do on the show. But I'm going to do it a little differently. I want to jump right into a project this time, or at least just to give people an idea of what you're actually moving in your industry. And Crystal sent us some images, and I wanted to bring those up. To me, they look like rocket ships on trailers. Is that what I'm looking at?
Yeah, we get into a lot of that kind of stuff with aerospace and specialty moving applications like that. Rockets are one thing that needs to be moved around very accurately. So we have to apply steering systems onto the trailers that move these rockets around and make sure everything's going to function properly. And it's a big deal. But
yeah, no kidding. So your KG Industries is an axle manufacturer. You specialize in that. You don't build trailers and all the other stuff. You build the actual axles. Is that correct?
Yeah. So we're primarily a specialty axle manufacturer who builds our products primarily for custom trailer manufacturers.
And this is a global. Well, I don't know about global, but you distribute to multiple countries around the world. Is that right?
Yeah, mostly North America, and then a little bit South America and Australia, and that's more or less our key markets.
And then I want to jump back to the rockets for a second, just because I want to know a little bit more about them. The couple of the projects that we're looking at, I know there's some you can't obviously discuss every detail about these types of projects, but can you just talk about some of the pictures that we're looking at?
Yeah, so oftentimes the trailers they use to move these rockets around, whether it's through the manufacturing process or right up to when they're going to actually position the rocket where they're going to erect it up into the launch site. Uh, we work with our trailer manufacturer customers to integrate steering systems into these trailers so that they can maneuver the rocket up to where they need to place it, and then put it up into the launch facility that they're going to use to shoot it off. So
What? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
no, that's good.
Oh no, I was just going to ask. So, what kind of specific axles are going on a trailer or a unit like this to move? Obviously, something that valuable, but also something that needs to be that maneuverable into place.
These would be hydraulic steering. We call them force steer axles or command steer axles. So normally these will be used with a manual control system. So either a wired or wireless remote control. They'll activate the steering. When they're not using the steering, the axles are locked straight. So that's how they'd be configured for highway travel if the trailer's going to be transporting them on the highways. Then when they get off site or onto the launch site or whatever they're doing with it, then they'll activate the steering and maneuver the trailer around. So the force steering axles allow you to manipulate the position of the trailer exactly how you want with the use of a remote control. So you can have somebody outside of the tow vehicle on the ground that's got a good view on what's going on, and then they can position the trailer how they want to for whatever it is they're doing with it.
Yeah, you beat me to that question because so it's actually so let's say someone is driving it down a highway. Once they pull onto site, then they actually they basically free it up so that it can move, and then so someone would it typically be somebody outside of the truck that's actually controlling it?
With this type of an application, definitely.
So how does that work? So how that is the truck still the driver? Like, is that still the engine to move it, or is there? Yeah.
Yeah. So the guy that's driving the truck is pulling the trailer still, but oftentimes with the length of these, if it's rocket trailer or anything really long like this where they need to steer, you can't see from the truck what you're actually trying to do at the back end. So there'll be either a pilot truck or somebody actually be out on the ground that will kind of assess the situation and steer the trailer as they see fit to maneuver it through whatever obstacle or whatever type of area they're trying to navigate.
So with the force steer axles on units like this, I mean, and these are obviously these are just an example of what you do. Are these custom axles, or are there specs that you follow on that's just a standard based on weight and size and that sort of thing, or do you have to know the dimensions, weight of everything you're going to carry, and then build a specific force steer axle for these units?
Yeah, so most of our axle products, force steer, self steer, whatever it is, have capacity ranges. So we look at what the payload requirements are. We choose a capacity range. There's some components on the axles that are going to be common throughout that capacity range, but more or less all the other dimensional characteristics are all custom tailored to the application. And especially on these force steering projects, it's very important that we know all the details, prove everything out. There's a lot of 3D modeling and back and forth with the customer to make sure everything's going to fit. Like on a regular trailer with a non-steerable axle, if it fits in when you bolt it up, then you're good. But on a steer axle, you have to consider the fact that the wheels and tires and it brakes and everything else and the steering linkage, that's all moving side to side and with suspension travel up and down. So you have to visualize the envelope that you need for everything to function properly and avoid any interferences and still get the performance that's required out of the piece of equipment. So it's, you got to know what you're doing, and you got to have really good communication, engineering department here and with the customer. And it's definitely not easy, but we've done it enough that we think we're pretty good at it.
Is that, there's a couple questions I have on that. When it comes to the braking systems and going back to the 4-steer axles, if someone's running it remotely in that, are you hooking up all the wiring components in that? Like what is the customer actually getting from you, and then what do they add on to that axle?
It kind of depends on the customer. So there's some customers that prefer to design and manufacture their own steering controls. So they'll buy the axle from us dressed out with the options they want on, maybe some custom features to integrate to their steering control. Then other times we'll have full hydraulic cylinder or steering linkage on the axle. So it just goes right into their steer system. And then in certain applications, we supply the entire axle, suspension, steering system, and the power unit to actually power the steering. So most of the time with these type of trailers, you'll need a gas engine hydraulic power unit or a diesel engine hydraulic power unit, depending on the other requirements on the trailer. They may already have the power unit factored into their project, so we won't need to supply that. And then next from the power unit is the actual hydraulic controls themselves, all the valves and the electronic side of it to run remote control if you're going to be using a remote, or if you're just going to use hand valves or a wired pendant. So it all depends on what the customer wants. Some are comfortable doing some of this they're on their own. Maybe they've got some proprietary concepts they apply to their trailer applications, and then others like just a turnkey setup where everything's taken care of by us.
I want to run through a couple of the other ones, Luke, because you have the 4-steer axles, and then you do things like the standard trailer axles, but you also do like self-steer axles, off-highway. It's one of those things, again, like so often happens on the show. I get the company that we're going to be featured. I might talk to them sometimes, or someone else books them. So, I kind of only have one or two quick calls with them before. And I think, oh, axles, well, that'll be an easy thing to talk about. And then I start digging and I go, oh no. Sometimes even it's the night before and I realize, okay, I know nothing about axles. So can you run through just some of well, let's start off with the self-steer axle. Can you run through that for us quickly?
Yeah, so the self-steer axle is a product line that really built our company. It was kind of the initial guiding principle of what we were going to be as KGI. And what a self-steer axle is, just an axle that will steer on its own without any external input, similar to like a caster on a chair. You push the chair one way and the wheel spins around behind the little post that goes into the bottom of the chair and just follows wherever you're pushing the chair. So a self-steer axle works in a similar way. They'll only steer going in the forward direction, and you lock them when you want to back up or lift them off the ground with a liftable suspension. And the idea of a self-steer axle is for applications where you've got a certain amount of payload and you've got weight and dimension regulations that stipulate what your maximum axle load can be. To carry more weight, you have to have more axles. So say it's 20,000 pounds per axle and you have 80,000 pounds on the axle setup, you need to have 4 axles. Well, normally once you go past 3, then you end up with some tire scuffing issues just because of the axle spread. So your tires wear out, you beat up the roads and the infrastructure. So in certain areas, provincial and state transportation regulations require the use of steer axles on the trailer so that the trailer and the whole setup isn't really beating up the roads and And also, you'd be going through tires like crazy if you had axles spread all down the trailer that didn't steer. So
Right.
that's the main purpose for those axles. They're not used to necessarily improve the maneuverability of the trailer. It's more so to spread out the weight and make sure that it performs properly and follows all the weight and dimension rules.
I was watching a video on your website, which is good. I actually hope we can get some of that footage to show up in this interview, because it's quite a nice layout to help the audience understand. And there's an air take damper system and a spring shock. I think is how it's. Could you sort of unpack the differences between the two in respect to a self steer?
Yeah. So it kind of depends on the application, the region, and just customer preference on what they want for a damper system. But essentially, a self-steer axle needs a damper system so that the tires don't wobble back and forth going down the road when you're actively steering. So what I mean by that is there's a lock on the axle, a mechanical lock that will keep it locked for high-speed travel. And then below a certain speed, when you want to use the steering, because you're likely going to navigate some turns, then you release the lock and the axle will steer. If you don't have a dampening system, then the axle is going to wobble all over and produce all kinds of undesired movement in your trailer and unpredictable behavior. So
back to that swivel chair kind of thing,
yeah.
right?
So like if your swivel chair was going 30 miles an hour, you probably wouldn't be gliding across necessarily smoothly. So we have to dampen all the harmonics and vibration that goes between the road and the tires into the trailer with a dampening system on a steer axle. So the two systems you mentioned, the airbag damper versus the dual spring shock. The key difference there is the airbag. It allows you to adjust the dampening pressure based on the air pressure you apply to the airbag itself. So when the axle steers, it compresses the airbag, gives resistance to the steering, and the idea is to calibrate the resistance so that it gives you steering but doesn't restrict the steering. So you kind of want maximum pressure without scuffing the tires.
Right.
So depending on the application, the advantage to that setup is you can adjust the pressure. You can also link that up to your suspension airbag pressure, which is adjustable based on the load of the trailer or what the trailer has on it for a load. So then it automatically compensates for the conditions. There's more parts to that system. It does require a little more maintenance, but it does have some performance advantages. The dual spring shock is kind of put them on and forget about them, and they're cheap, and there's no external inputs or adjustments required once you've installed them. So it's kind of one of those things where once they're put on, they can't be put on wrong after they've been set up properly the first time. Whereas the airbag, you could go and adjust things and then have it totally function incorrectly. So those are the two key differences. And the shocks are cheaper, they're more cost effective, simpler, they're easy to get anywhere. So some customers prefer that, where other customers don't. Where we see the airbag is more popular is in applications where the steerable is going to be lifted when the trailer's unloaded. They like that because then when the tires come off the ground, the airbag system always centers the axle out. Whereas with the shocks, over time, as the shocks wear, you may get a slight difference in the resistance force in each shock because there's two of them pushing against each other. So then if you're lifting the axle may kind of steer a little bit on its own once it's off the ground, and it looks kind of funny going down the road.
Is the damper system, if I'm understanding it right, would that be more for an application where the load weights are going to vary and the environment that you're going to be traveling in is going to vary more so than a spring shock, where it's very, you kind of know what you're going to be putting on that unit and the terrain that you'll be traveling on. Is that kind of right, or not? Is that not really why you'd go one system or the other?
I think that's a fair assessment. Yeah, varying loads with a damper system that can vary its resistance is a sensible solution, whereas the shocks will be used in applications where you're either going to be unloaded or fully loaded. It's not normally going to be somewhere in between.
I feel like if I'm ever, for any reason, a buyer in the industry for axles, I'll know just enough after this interview to be really annoying to the person who's trying to sell me the axles. And I asked you this off the air, and it's sort of when you're selling this, and I want to get into some of the off highway axles as well. But when you're doing these sales now, you'd be selling. Well, let's start off with who your customers. A lot of times, are they actual trailer manufacturers? Is that who you're dealing with directly, in general, or does it vary?
It's mainly trailer manufacturers. So there'll be somebody building some custom equipment that might need some, like we get into some of these off-road portable oil rig type applications where they're not trailer builders, they're equipment builders, or maybe it's a piece of mobile equipment for a site, say a steel coil facility or some off-road application where they've hired somebody to design and manufacture them a piece of equipment to move stuff on site. Then they're not necessarily a trailer manufacturer, be a custom equipment provider.
So how much involvement does a trailer manufacturer, obviously if it's someone like the latter example you made, that they're going to be quite involved because they're going to need a lot of details to understand they're getting the right thing. But a trailer manufacturer, does it vary quite a bit on how much they're involved with what they're getting, or a lot of times is it them sending you specs and then you sort of get trusted to develop or match them up with the right products?
Yeah, it depends what kind of products that trailer builder manufactures. So if it's a manufacturer that has specific lines of products that they sell and there's not a ton of variance as far as the running gear is concerned, then there's a lot of back and forth at the start to develop the axle solution for the customer, make sure it fits, then maybe do a couple trial units to make sure everything goes together in reality, because a lot of times in 3D modeling and that, which is hugely helpful from back in the days of just 2D AutoCAD and that, you kind of had to visualize it in your head while you looked at the drawing, whereas with this 3D software that everybody uses now, it's a lot easier to check all your clearances, make sure everything theoretically is going to work. Then you usually run a couple of prototype or test units through with their trailers, make sure everything went together the way that it was expected. And then after that, there's not much more required for that specific application. So there may be customers that they might use 3 or 4 or 5 different steer axles over and over and over. So once those applications have been sorted out and all the development work is done, then there's not as much back and forth on the technical side of things. Right. But then we have customers that are more tailored to custom trailer solutions all the time. So things like these rocket trailers or say windmill towers or precast concrete or heavy haul, where their customers, say the fleet or the end user that's going to be buying the trailers, they may have unique requirements every time. So there tends to be trailer manufacturers that cater to those one-off. Yeah, we'll make it custom for you every time. Then our job is to make sure we have really good relationship with the trailer manufacturer, specifically the engineering department, so that we know kind of all the ins and outs on how to go through the process of making sure we can provide a proper solution for them. And those customers they're the ones that are, I think, a lot of fun to work with, because they're always trying something new and adopting new technology and kind of putting new concepts into the market for how things can be moved. And that's more or less in alignment with our philosophy of always trying to work on continuous improvement and bring new ideas and new technology to the market.
Does it change quite a bit? Have you noticed in every other area of industry, has there been quite an acceleration in technology, just like sensor-based systems and those types of things? Do you get involved with that, or is that something that's more on the end user of the trailer manufacturer?
We do get involved in it, but when it comes down to it, the end user that gets the trailer, say it has a fully automatic electronic control system to steer the axles all the time. It's a very complex piece of equipment with that type of setup with an electronic steering system. You're dealing with not just mechanics and hydraulics, but also electronics, and it adds a lot of complexity. So the trailer manufacturer has to provide a lot more support to their customer for a trailer like that. So it's fairly important that they know what's going on. So on those type of projects, it tends to be them that will drive the project and learn about it and know about it, and then we will participate by supplying the axles and maybe collaborate with the steering system provider. Most of those type of systems where the operator doesn't have to do anything to make the trailer steer, just driving down the road. There'll be a sensor in the fifth wheel of the trailer, which is right up at the front, that will measure the angle between the truck and the trailer. And then that tells the axle units on the trailer how to steer based on the speed and the angle and all that. Most of those type of systems come from Europe right now, just because they've been using that technology over there for a lot of years already. But it is starting to pick up over here, and a couple of our customers have tackled projects like this on their own with their own systems, and we've done some of that ourselves, and it's definitely interesting. It's the next step, but it does add a whole nother dimension to what you have to deal with, and it's not something that should be rushed, in my opinion. I think the market itself is not totally used to steerable trailers right now. They're out there, people know how to use them, manufacturers know how to build them, but I think it needs a little bit more time before we can take that next step and introduce more complex technology into the trailer, electronics and sensors and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, technology is one of those things, especially when stuff is big and heavy and moves fast. You want to do it. It's better right than fast, right?
Yeah. The last thing you want is a guy on the side of the road and doesn't know how to work it, or something went wrong. He doesn't know what went wrong, and who's going to figure that out now? So
yeah, exactly.
If it's more of a simple type steering system that you steer with a remote control, well, everything's likely hydraulic or mechanical. You can crawl under the thing, see if something broke or blew a hose or a fuse or something. It's fairly easy to diagnose. But when you've got computer systems and all this kind of stuff that have default safe modes that they go into, and the guy driving the truck, he might not know what to do. So then wherever he is, he's got to wait for somebody to come out and figure it out for him. So
yeah, wherever he is, exactly. The industries you serve, of course, we're talking everything, like you said. You go from aerospace to the energy sector to mining, long haul, everything, all that. But the off-road highway axles, and I want to get into shortly. I want to get into a couple of these projects because again, Crystal sent some pictures that are really good, and I want to just highlight what those projects are. But I just wanted to quickly distinguish between an off-highway axle, because you've got, I just want to bring up the notes here so I get this right. We already looked at the self-steer axles. We looked at the four steers. Is an off-highway axle, is it essentially a supersized version of that, or what's the difference what's the key differences that can make an off-road haul, let's say 100,000 pounds on an axle? Can you just kind of outline the separation of an off-highway from these other ones that we've already discussed?
Yeah, so like an on-highway axle has to conform to weight and dimension standards for the region that it's going to operate in. Once you go off-highway, then there is no weight and dimension restrictions or rules or regulations or standards to follow. So you can get pretty creative in how you design equipment to move stuff around off-road. So the main difference is just how heavy duty does the axle need to be, and that's decided by, of course, capacity, payload, service environment, duty cycle. Is it something that's going to be used to move a piece of equipment around every now and then, or is this going to be a 24/7 long distance hauling operation, say at a mine for hauling the ore or concentrate or whatever it is that they're doing? So we have to look at all those types of details on what is the application, and the service environment usually is in these off-highway applications is quite severe, like up in the Arctic or in the desert overseas. So we deal with really hot, really cold temperatures. And one thing that's particularly important with steel is that if it's very, very cold, like Arctic conditions, steel becomes brittle if you don't select the proper steel and
Right.
proper components. So you need to maintain strength at those cold temperatures, and you also need to make sure that it's fine at regular temperatures. So it takes a little bit of work to figure that all out, and we've been doing it for a long time now, so we kind of know what works and what doesn't work. And I think our customer base trusts that we supply a good product that's going to be durable and withstand the time that the equipment needs to operate. And we also, on the off-highway stuff, we manufacture a lot of the components in-house, down to wheel studs and hubs and even the braking components. So it's we're able to control our supply for and support of all the parts you need to keep that equipment going. Whereas if you look at the highway axle market, the idea is that you build to standards so that anybody can get parts anywhere, and you're not always having to come back to you for every little nut and bolt or brake chamber or bearing or whatever it is that they need to replace.
Yeah, the off-road stuff. I mean, again, if you're sure you've watched, I've got a bit of a bias toward that because a lot of our shows have that heavy duty off-road component with the mining, the energy projects, and things like that. I wanted to discuss a couple of these pictures, Luke, that you have, because I'm just going to butcher a couple of them. As I see, I think it's a crane, and it's a Sterling crane on a black trailer with yellow rims. And I just wanted you to just touch on a couple. Then I see another one here. It's on an orange trailer, and I should know what that is, but I don't. I think it's an industry product. Can you walk through a couple of those images that we're going to bring up and just talk us through what they either who they're for, but also what type of axles go on these to transport this particular type of unit?
Yeah, so the photo with the crane boom on there, that Sterling project, that trailer is manufactured by a company called Nelson Trailers. They do a lot of really specialized type trailers over a really diverse set of applications: aerospace, cranes, heavy haul, portable power generation. This particular project, it was designed to move this crane boom along with the crane to the site. And the idea is that you can use this trailer to back the crane boom right up to the crane and mount it onto the crane. Whereas normally with a with a boom that size to haul on a conventional trailer, you'll need to get a secondary crane to then lift that boom off, put it onto the big crane, and that's a whole nother step. And this trailer actually moves that crane boom down to the back end, so it can go right onto the crane, and the guy can just drive the trailer out from it. So it cuts out that whole step, and Nelson was pretty innovative to come up with that concept. And they also apply a really innovative running gear system to it. So you can see, if you're going to show that picture, there's axles down the entire length of the trailer.
Yeah.
And they're actually two separate short axles on either side of the trailer in each axle line. And the axles they're very short, and they're not a steerable axle, but they're mounted onto a steerable hydraulic suspension. So the suspension has I think it's almost 24 inches of up and down travel. It can be manually adjusted, so you can change the height of the trailer to what you need it to be. And each set of suspensions will steer independently, and they're set up in a linkage, but they're set up so they progressively steer. So the ones on the back will steer in the opposite direction of the ones on the front, which just essentially just shortens the turning radius of the vehicle combination. So that trailer will turn a really tight circle, and the tires won't scrub at all. And the load is distributed throughout the entire length of the trailer. So there's not really anybody else manufacturing a trailer like that in North America right now, other than these guys at Nelson. So it's an interesting project we were excited to be a part of.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was trying to think of like rates, and I couldn't come to mind on how much it would take to get a secondary crane in to come in, lift it, be there for the day, and then of course if the truck doesn't get there on time, it could get moved into the second day, or all this stuff that happens on site. And then there's a couple project that again, that Peerless one on that orange trailer, but there's also the really neat one with this wind energy picture, which is just crazy looking. So that's a project that you collaborate with Peerless then? Are they the manufacturer of the trailer?
Yeah. So a wind towers that's the big long cylinder.
Yeah, it's a giant long cylinder. There's two photos that I see that are from Peerless. The big long cylinder, and then there's another one on that. It's on an orange trailer with the word Element on the side, or brand Element.
Yeah. So the windmill tower, I think they're about 14-foot diameter. So they have to be transported really close to the ground so that you can still get under things, overpass things like that. And in order to do that, you have to be a bit creative in how you design the trailer. So that particular trailer is, I think you call that like a schnabel setup. So it grabs onto the tower. So the tower actually forms a trailer. It's just a dolly essentially at the back and the front, and it grabs onto the tower and kind of turns everything into the one full unit. But you can see at the back end there, the axles are spread out quite a bit. And in order to keep your weight and dimensions within regulations. So when you do that and spread them out like that, you have to steer some of them or you won't be able to turn it. So that particular application, I believe, had a mechanically linked force steering setup in it.
Yeah, that's great. It's wild. It's so wild. And then okay, let's go. Now I'm just having fun looking at pictures. I'll refocus myself. Okay, so the Peerless one on that. What is that? What is that unit that's sitting on? Just quickly, and then I want to jump over to the AccuSteel one. But that orange trailer with the Element sitting on it. What is that unit?
So that's a coil tubing trailer used in the oil fracking industry. So the idea is to get as much length of tubing onto a trailer as you can out to the site, and then that tube is uncoiled and sent down the drill hole. And obviously the more tubing you get, the deeper you can go with one coil. So the coils are really large diameter, so the same as that windmill tower, you need to try to get the coil close to the ground. It's heavy, So how do you do that? You need to design a trailer that's going to fit it, as well as all the other stuff that you need to deploy it. And you end up having to have a lot of axles on the ground to be able to drive this thing down the highway. So it's the same idea, spreading a combination of non-steerables and steerables onto the back of the trailer to allow maneuverability both on the highway and once you're off-road trying to get on site.
Yeah. And would that be similar to that, that AccuSteel one? They're hauling a cat. I can't tell what size of cat that is, but it's on a black trailer and truck. And I mean, that thing is, I don't even know what that cat would weigh, but what does it take, that AccuSteel one? What does it take to, what is that process of putting that those axles together and knowing the right ones? Like, do they come with those specs on that particular size of trailer?
Yeah, so that's kind of a typical West Coast heavy haul type setup. So you don't necessarily need to use steerable axles in those types of setups. You need to use a combination of Jeeps and boosters and deck lengths and trailers. So the trailer itself in that photo is just the part that's under the cat and the three axles behind it. And then everything else are just other pieces of equipment that form the trailer unit that keep all the weight and dimensions within specs, so that you can actually get that thing down the road. So it's normally what you see on the West Coast in Canada and also in the US is multi-axle setups like that with Jeeps and boosters, and depending on how much weight you got depends on how many axles you need. And I think probably anybody on the West Coast probably seen something like that go down the highway.
Oh yeah, no, I've seen it, and it never ceases to amaze me. I just, as we're sort of getting towards the tail end of the interview, Luke, I do want to touch on a couple things. You've got a pretty strong name in the industry. You were a guest that was recommended to us by Transworld, and just kind of going through and getting to know you a little bit and know your team and your customers and that sort of thing. What do you think? You live in sort of a specialized space, from what I understand. That's sort of your key customer base is doing these I'm screwing up the stealth steer axles, the four steer axles. That's sort of the space that you live in. What is it for you that's just allowed you to continue on working with these customers for so long and continuing to find more? What is the key, whether it be from a team perspective or business development or having a presence out in the market? What has been that key for you at leading this company?
Well, you have to start with a good product that works and is good and that your customers will like and appreciate. But more or less just comes down to always realizing that we have to pay attention to the details, and we have to really pay attention to our relationship with the customers so that we can build good trust. They know what our capabilities are. They know if we say yes, that we're going to execute the project and it's going to work, and they don't usually doubt that. So that's kind of how we've built our reputation. We don't really get into things and promise things that we don't feel we can do, and there's not a lot we don't think we can do. And normally if we don't think we can convince the customer that maybe something different is more appropriate. So it kind of just comes down to open communication and really understanding what we're doing, what they're trying to do, and making sure that all fits together. And good engineering team, knowing the right questions to ask and knowing how to support our product. So that's key. You can make anything and send it out there, but to try to make sure that product is going to be supported and parts available and technical assistance available down the road when maybe everyone that was originally involved isn't around anymore, you can still help out whoever has that equipment. So that's pretty important. And nowadays, with kind of living in the digital age where everything is computerized, we've got the 3D models where everybody's running ERP systems mostly now in the manufacturing companies. So the front end workload on these type of orders is really heavy, in the sense that we need full documentation packages. So it used to be you kind of just had to figure out what it was you were going to make the person, share some information, get a sign off, and away you go. But now everybody expects full work in 3D models, a full bill of materials, and that all has to kind of work through the systems that everyone uses now, is from inquiry to quote to order, then into purchasing, all that kind of stuff. So it's a lot of work, but the nice part about it is then you have this really good history of what you did, and you've got really good record keeping, and that's valuable down the road. When you forget about it, it's not all fresh in your head what the project was about. So
it's like the old days of just trying to find the right paper to filing before everything could be on a, now, yeah, even from our side, everything that I need, I could do the same job from a Starbucks as I can from the office, as I can, traveling to Alberta. It's just crazy. And you take it for granted what you can do now. But that documentation, I wish you had a little more time to unpack that documentation side. Hopefully we can get you on again, because some of those systems would be quite interesting to unpack. But, Luke, the company was started in the 70s by your father, and then you took it over in 2001. And we've had a lot of stories on the show of how people came into the positions, and they come in all different ways. In your case, it wasn't. It probably wasn't the way that you would want to have came into the leadership position. But can you tell us sort of how you became, from your father starting the company and then to you ending up as the president?
Yeah, so I guess just a bit on the history there. KGI was actually co-founded by my dad and his partner at the time, last night, and that's where the KG comes from. And at that time, they had a custom trailer company called Night Trailer, and KGI was kind of developed as a subsidiary. And then as time went on, my dad kind of got out of the trailer business side and just focused on the KGI axle company. And we were originally down in the Vancouver area. In the mid 90s, moved it up to the interior where we are now. And I kind of grew up working through the company, out in the shop, all the different production departments, and then decided to do engineering school and all that, with the idea to eventually come back. Then, shortly after I was finished college, I found out my dad was sick with cancer, and kind of changed gears and on what my plan was to come back right away and really focus on the business. They didn't know how much time I had left, and I was in my early 20s when he eventually did pass away. So it was a lot to take on fairly young. He set me up with a couple of his colleagues that retired, semi-retired people that had lots of business experience, and they mentored me a bit when I was younger, and still do. Really good friends of mine now, and that helped a lot. But it was a challenge for sure. But yeah, over the years we've grown the company, we've expanded our facility, we've expanded our product offerings, increased our revenues quite a bit, and things are going pretty good. And it's been enjoyable, and it's a lot of fun to be in the transportation industry. You get to meet a lot of interesting people and go to a lot of interesting places, and see how people are solving problems all over the world. So yeah, it's been good.
Did you, when at that age, when you're dealing with something so heavy on the personal side, and I mean, I ran a business when I was quite young as well, but I didn't have that personal aspect of what you had with your father. I mean, obviously it was hard, but what sort of was your mindset going in to be in your mid-20s and having to essentially take on this burden? You mentioned earlier that you were planning to come back, but it happened sooner than you planned. But what was that mindset, sort of getting prepared to knowing that you were going to have to take full responsibility very soon?
I think it was just kind of reflecting on the opportunity that it was a good business and had a lot of potential, and I really enjoyed it, and it was close to me. My dad really put a lot of his heart and soul into it, and kind of brought me up through all the different departments, and I did machining and welding and assembly and quality control, and right back at the beginning, just sweeping the floors. So it was close to me and close to him, and yeah, I knew I could do it. I knew my dad's thought process. He was really technical and paid attention to details, and wasn't really a show off kind of guy. So I just figured that as long as I kind of structured my mindset with the same values, pay attention and work hard and make sure that you really think about things before you say yes to them. And that's kind of what got me going. And I guess the biggest challenge is just learning how to be in a leadership role at such a young age, and learning how to deal with the dynamics of people, both just like employees, customers, suppliers, and getting out there into the marketing and advertising side is a big learning curve. So, and I guess it always will be. So
yeah, I think that is one of the things. I'd say every guest that comes on here, they do sponsorship. I mean, companies do just amazing stuff, and so I always just kind of look to see what they support and everything like that. And then now you're out in Cawston, BC, which is, I really want to get this name because I was getting it right off. It's kind of in the Okanagan, Similkameen area, right? So that area, which is a beautiful area of BC that you're in, and so I looked at what you sponsor locally, and I'm gonna read them out. Chapac, you said your father wasn't a show off, and getting to know you, you're not that type of person either. But I'm gonna read them out, so it's me showing you off. BC Chapaca Rodeo, BC High School Rodeo, Okanagan Similkameen Junior Sports, Okanagan Similkameen Cobu Regional Park, Canadian Wildlife Federation, Similkameen Sizzy, Fraser River Sturgeon Conservation Society, South Okanagan Women in Need Society. That's a lot of support for local. And that means something. You do one or two, that might be for the brand. You do 10. It's because you support your community. And I saw there were some pictures that will show up on the Chapaca Rodeo. And, is that an easy decision for you to make, to just sort of support the local community? Obviously, you're hiring local people. Sort of how do you approach that?
Yeah, it's a pretty easy decision. I think for me, we kind of focus on local events and wildlife conservation and youth sports primarily. So if it fits into any of those categories, and we know it's a good cause, or it makes sense to invest in whatever they're trying to do, then there's not a lot of hesitation. If it makes sense to us, we're willing to help out and contribute, because community is important, and I really enjoy where I live and grew up here. So yeah, it's pretty simple.
Yeah, well, no, and it should be that. It really should be. The rodeo stood out for me. Of course, I rodeoed until I was about 12 or 13, and then gave that up. But I've got a lot of family that rodeos. So on a personal level, that support for the rodeo, and sort of the love of the sport, it's good to see, a business like yourself that does work at a global scale, that you're still sort of taking care of on the local level. So, I thought it'd be a nice way to wrap up the interview without trying to embarrass you too much, to just highlight that, because it is important, and it's good. Luke, thanks for coming on the show. I really do appreciate it. It's a lot to, there was some topics, there's some interesting stuff that you do. We're kind of running out of time, and I hope you come back, because there's some interesting stuff that we still could unpack. But I think we did a lot of technical this interview, and so I want to wrap it up and then hopefully get you back on someday. But thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for watching. You should go to their website. I'm going to make sure I get it right. We'll have links and everything. Don't worry. It's just simply kgi.ca. So about the easiest website that you can find, kgi.ca. Get in touch with them. See some of the work they do. They've got these really nice, hopefully we can bring them, we'll have them up, or we've had them up on the interview. But they do the really nice videos showing you how the axles are designed and everything. Great company. Thanks again to Luke for coming on. Thanks for watching, everybody. We will see you on the next episode.
Thank you for watching. Please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook and LinkedIn. Also, if you would like to help support the production of the show, head on over to crownsmen.com/donations. There you will find two options, the $5 monthly subscription option and the support heavy industry one-time donation option. Again, that is crownsmen.com/donations. Thank you so much to all of our sponsors on this episode, and we will see you guys on the next one.